Hey guys, Paul here, the Impulsive Culinarian, and in this video I want to talk to you about my homemade gluten-free gnocchi recipe. I have to start this video outside. It is absolutely gorgeous. The garden has been planted. We have a nice long weekend and the herbs are there in the garden. They're just starting to grow. It's the transition between, not really spring and full-on spring, and I'm so excited. From a culinary standpoint, this is one of my favorite times of the year. This recipe is going to be for some gluten-free gnocchi. We're using russet potatoes and some basic ingredients. If you've ever made gluten-free stuff, you've got everything in the pantry that you could possibly need. The flours, the starches, really simple stuff. However, it's a little bit, labor intensive because you have to put together a dough and using your hands. And guys, if you get excited about that kind of thing like I do, this is the recipe for you. Let me tell you, there's a reason that I have saved this recipe as the finale of my 6 weeks of spring recipes, because it is the star. You will absolutely love this recipe. Time intensive, yes. Worth the effort? Absolutely. We're using some good fresh ingredients, some fresh basil. I wish I could pluck it from the garden. It's not quite ready yet. So this will probably be my last batch of store-bought basil, I hope, anyway, fingers crossed. A couple of Roma tomatoes just to add that fresh springtime, extra flavor. And really, that's it. It's a beautiful, simple spring recipe. Let's get it together with these ingredients. Okay, so let's split this out into two groups of ingredients, guys. We're going to start with the gnocchi dough ingredients. You're going to need 2 pounds of russet potatoes, 3/4 of a cup of sweet rice flour, plus a little bit more for dusting the counter space that you're going to be using for putting this together, 1/2 cup of corn flour, 1/4 cup of tapioca flour, a teaspoon of fine sea salt, and 1 organic egg. Now, we're going to call this the additional ingredients. Everything else, all right, you're going to need 2 tablespoons and more of dairy-free margarine. More because when we saute these gnocchis in a brown butter, you're going to need a few tablespoons as you go along, okay? 1 tablespoon of olive oil, 4 shallots, which you're going to thinly slice, 4 garlic cloves, also thinly sliced, 2 Roma tomatoes, peeled, seeded, and chopped up into a rough chop, 1/3 of a cup of fresh basil, don't go for anything less, 1/4 cup of white wine, something that you would drink, 1 teaspoon of kosher salt, some freshly ground black pepper to taste, and 3 ounces of dairy-free white cheese, finely grated. So what a shame to have to go inside on a perfectly beautiful day like today. As much as I would love to cook on the patio, it's a flowery, environment with making a homemade pasta. I want to have that control of the kitchen. So let's get inside. So guys, welcome to the last episode of my 6 weeks of spring recipes. I cannot wait to make this one. So guys, weigh out your russet potatoes. I mean, I could tell you use 4 potatoes, but I really think that one of the important parts of making this recipe a success is to have the exact right proportion of ingredients with the potatoes and the different flours and starches that we're going to be using. So rather than give you a number of potatoes, I'm going to say get a scale and measure out your 2 pounds. That's the way to start. Peel them up. Now, when you've got your potatoes all peeled up, you want to cut them into roughly the same size chunks so that they'll boil evenly at around the same pace, okay? So if you've got a medium one, chop it in half. A largish medium one, maybe chop it into thirds. And the big guys, act accordingly. So you've got your peeled and chopped up potatoes in the pot. You want to cover that with enough warm water by 3 or 4 inches at least, okay, to allow for some of the water to evaporate and still have them be submerged, because you're cooking this for 30 minutes to get them really nice and soft. Heavily salted water, throw in 2-3 tablespoons, don't be shy. So there we go. The potatoes are covered with a good 3 to 4 inches of water. It's heavily salted. 3 tablespoons of salt, be generous, be heavy-handed. And as soon as that comes to a boil, you want to reduce the heat just, to medium-high so it doesn't bubble over, and let them cook for 30 minutes. So while those potatoes are getting underway, great opportunity to chop up some shallots and garlic and tomatoes. So that's great to have it done in advance. Your sliced up shallots, sliced up garlic, and peeled and seeded tomatoes. Looking good. Next, we're going to chop up some basil. Okay, so as far as the fresh basil, you can add a lot more than 1/3 cup if you want, but once it's chopped, it might take almost all of this bushel of basil to fill up 1/3 cup. You can use more or less if you like. Basically, put in a bunch of fresh basil. All right, it's a bit too much. That's just me being impulsive. Let's measure out a hefty 1/3 cup. So all of this prep so far has taken me around almost 20 minutes. So listen, I got 10 more minutes to wait on the potatoes. I'm gonna grate some cheese. So guys, I got around 4 minutes left on the timer for my potatoes. Now they are ridiculously soft and exactly where I need them to be. I could let them go the full 30, but I'm sort of running out of things to do. So I'm gonna drain them very carefully using a colander in my sink. And I'm going to be as gentle as I can. I want to try and keep those soft pieces of cooked potato intact. That's the challenge, but if a couple of break apart, it's not the end of the world. Once I've drained them out thoroughly, I want to transfer them into a bowl of cold water. You can even add a few ice cubes if you want to. I want to really stop the cooking process of those potatoes. They're fully cooked. You can't cook them anymore, but still, we need them to chill down a little bit so that we can handle them using a cheese grater, okay? Or a potato ricer if you've got. I don't have one, so I'm going to use my grater. All right, I'm going to go drain these and come back with some chilled potatoes. Transfer complete. Let's have a look. So there we go. The potatoes have been transferred into some cold water. They're chilling for the next 5 minutes. You can see one of them kind of fell apart, but that's okay. For the most part, they're all intact. Once I can handle them with my bare hands, I'm going to grate them and make some pasta. So guys, we're doing this different camera angle if you haven't already guessed, because this is where we're going to be assembling the gnocchi pasta, and I need a large counter space. So clean off your largest counter space and get ready for some getting your hands dirty work. Before we get started on that though, you have to put another pot of hot water on the stove. You want to make sure to boil around, I would say a good 5 inches or so of heavily salted water. That's where we're going to be boiling, cooking the final product after it's all assembled. So get that on the stovetop now so it comes to a boil, and let's start working with our cooked potatoes. So I think part of what made my original test recipe of this fail was the fact that I didn't properly dry out my cooked potatoes. I just drained them. I riced them or grated them, and I used them, but they were a little bit damp to start. There's no other liquid in the pasta recipe because it really doesn't need it. The egg is enough. So what I decided to do was take a very thickly lined with paper towel, okay, just a wide plate. I'm going to drain these potatoes. I'm going to transfer them to this paper towel lined plate so that they can really dry and get all of the moisture out as much as possible. Then, and only then, are they going to be ready to go into the dough. Let's drain them away. They're so well cooked, guys. These are very fragile. So I'm going to gingerly place them on my paper towel so I don't break them any more than they already have. Let them dry for a couple of minutes. All right, so we're going to start the process of bringing together all of the dry ingredients for our gnocchi recipe. Now, what I like to do is take all of the dry flours and starches that I'm going to be using, get them in a large mixing bowl so that I can grate my potatoes into the dry mixture. It's just a lot easier for it to come together, and then I can transfer that to a large floured surface before I start kneading the dough. I will tell you, I know that some of you have told me in comments of previous videos, Paul, I can't find sweet rice flour. This is an essential ingredient. This is actually the main dry ingredient. I'm going to insist that you try your best to find this stuff. Now, I've done some research. I know that, a lot of health food stores have it, but if you can't find it in your area, listen, I know that Bob's Red Mill, okay, and this is, I'm not endorsing it for money. I'm just telling you what I'm using. Bob's Red Mill is probably one of the easiest, ingredients to find because they have, I'm sure, some kind of ability to deliver by ordering online and all this kind of stuff. It's a non-perishable product. So if you can't find it in your local store, maybe try and find a way to get it online. Bob's Red Mill is a good way to go. So sweet rice flour, that's the main ingredient. Get some of that. It kind of acts like a starch. It kind of acts like a flour. And in fact, I'd like to refer you to a video that I did a while back about various gluten-free flours and starches and the different properties. So if you want to do a little bit more research into that, check out my video and hopefully that'll help you understand why this is the way to go. Okay, so let's assemble the dry mixture. Let's get 3/4 cup of sweet rice flour into the bowl. And then keep your sweet rice flour out because you're going to need more of it to flour your countertop. All right, so next we want to get a half of a cup of corn flour. Now, that's not cornstarch, and it's not cornmeal, that gritty stuff. Corn flour, very important, half a cup. And guys, always use level measuring tools that you can trust. None of this eyeballing in a large container. That's going to throw off your mix, I promise you. Level cups. And the last main dry ingredient is my go-to starch, 1/4 cup of tapioca flour. Now it's misleading. They call it flour, but it is a starch. So 1/4 cup of that. Okay, last dry ingredient, get your teaspoon of fine sea salt into the flour and starch mixture, but don't add the egg just yet. Let's keep this a dry mixture until we've added our potatoes in. All right, so whisk together that flour mixture with the salt so that it acts like one ingredient. Incidentally, when your water has come to a boil, just partially cover it and bring it down to medium so it stays hot until you're actually ready to boil this stuff. So if you've got a potato ricer, good on you. I'm a bit envious, all right? I do not have such a device, but I do have a cheese grater, right? One of these standard cheap guys. So I'm going to use the large, coarse grating side of my grater, and I'm going to make sure to grate these potatoes right into my flour bowl mixture. Nary a potato left in sight. Now, let's add an egg and bring it together. Go organic. So one thing I've learned in my trials with this particular recipe, guys, is that you just want to combine it enough so that the potatoes and the flour are just combined, all right? And once you get to that stage, that's when you want to transfer it to your floured surface. Don't overwork the dough. Clean hands, get in there. All right, so 1 minute or so of working that dough should be more than enough. Then you want to put a generous amount of that sweet rice flour on your countertop and transfer the dough right into that spot. All right, so no more than another minute or so, max. Let's bring this dough together, knead it until it becomes even more combined. All right, so this is the consistency that you're looking for. It's still soft and slightly tacky or sticky, okay? But you can work with it. And that's where you want to stop kneading. Wash your hands and get ready to roll. All right, so to collect the final product of your hard work, get your biggest baking sheet, all right? Put it on the side. You can line it with parchment paper or wax paper if you want, or more importantly, put in a good amount of that sweet rice flour and shake it around so that it coats the whole bottom. As you're making your gnocchi pasta, you're going to put each piece into this sort of flour bed, all right, to keep it from sticking. All right, so next you want to clean off any kind of little pieces of pasta that are still stuck to your counter so it's nice and flat. Put in another little dose of that sweet rice flour. With a good sharp knife, you want to cut your pasta into 4 pieces, okay? 4 equal sized pieces. And those quarters are going to be the ones that you start to roll into a long cigar-shaped length. Let's go. There we go. 1 rope of gnocchi pasta. So get a small, sharp paring knife and start cutting them into around 1/2-inch size lengths. Voila. Transfer those into your baking sheet. Roll them around so that they get fully coated with the flour. Now, I know a lot of people, talk about how you're going to put the little fork indentations or a thumbprint. Guys, do what you want. This is going to be delicious no matter what it looks like, okay? Do that again for your other 3/4 pieces. All right, a full batch of homemade gluten-free gnocchis. Clean up. All right, station number 1 section complete. Moving to station number 2. There we go. It's kind of back to normal. So this is the treasure trove of homemade gnocchis that we've made, all sitting comfortably in some sweet rice flour. Now, what we want to do, make sure that your water is up to boil and you still have some water in the pot, depending on how long you took. If you're missing some, add a bit. You want to have at least 4 or 5 inches minimum so that those gnocchis get a chance to, boil and float to the top when they're done. That only takes a couple of minutes per batch. Once they're boiled, all right, and cooked, we're going to put them in a large skillet in a brown butter. Now, a dairy-free brown butter. That means I'm going to use my infamous soy-free, dairy-free margarine, 2 tablespoon batches at a time, and we're going to sort of speed fry them over medium-low heat, and then we're going to transfer them into the final plate where you're not supposed to eat them, but guaranteed you're going to have some. Wait and see how delicious these are. All right, so that's the step. Part 1, gnocchis. Part 2, boil them. Part 3, fry them in a brown butter. Part 4, put them on a plate and don't touch. Let's get that large non-stick skillet over medium-low heat. Now, just a note before we get started, guys, the quality of your non-stick skillet is very important. If you've got sort of a crappy old skillet that doesn't really have that non-stick coating left, I would avoid using it. Maybe you want to go and get one because it is so imperative. We're going to treat these gnocchis kind of like pieces of meat. Now, if you've ever seared a piece of meat, you put it in the pan and you let it go. You don't touch it. You don't try and wiggle it around. You just let it get that brown sear. And then when it does, it becomes easy to unstick. That is exactly what we're going to be doing with the gnocchi. As soon as they come out of that boiling water, they're very sticky, okay? So in small batches, I would say 30 to 40 at a time, we're going to put them in the brown butter and we're going to let them be. Don't touch. As soon as you start to, mess around with the pan and that's when they stick together and they end up ruining the dish. There's the trick. It's all about having a good quality non-stick pan. All right, let's put this theory into practice. So start off by getting 2 tablespoons of your dairy-free margarine into the warm skillet. And keep that margarine nearby. You're going to need a lot more of it. Get yourself a slotted spoon because that's going to be essential for scooping out those cooked gnocchis and getting them into the warm skillet. You don't have to count them out, but around 20 or 30 if you've got a smaller skillet, 30 or 40 if you've got a large one like this, small batches so that they're not quite touching each other. That's the key. All right, water's boiling, skillet is hot. Let's go. 30 or so into the batch. Transfer the floaters. Don't touch them. Let them brown and sear until they get a little bit golden on one side. Then we're going to toss them over. So just to prove my theory correct, you can just take one with a little fork and try and push it. You'll see it just doesn't, it's stuck. And don't get discouraged. You let it sit there a little bit longer and they're suddenly going to be a little bit more free to move around. Okay, so if you've done as I've suggested, you see none of them are sticking to the pan. Good quality pan, very important. Get those out into the final plate. And you want to reload with another tablespoon or so of dairy-free margarine for the next batch. Freaking addictive. Absolutely addictive. Damn it, they're good. Wow. When you've finished sauteing your last batch of gnocchi, you'll be glad that long process is over. And if you've done well, you haven't eaten more than, let's say, 15 of these little pillows of amazingness. So, clean up your workstation and let's get ready for the final stage. All right, so get that non-stick skillet back over the medium-low heat and add a tablespoon of olive oil. Next, get your sliced shallots into the hot skillet. Saute those onions for around a minute and then add in your sliced garlic. Once the garlic is in, saute those onions and garlic together for another minute. All right, so that pan has been good and hot for a long time. So no more than a minute on the onions, then a minute on the garlic. Then you want to add your chopped tomatoes and your freshly chopped basil. The smells right now, fantastic. So let these guys go all together in the skillet for another 2 minutes. All right, as if it wasn't fragrant enough, let's add a 1/4 cup of some good white wine. And let that reduce. After all of the hard work of putting this gnocchi dish together, guys, it's almost an emotional experience to finally see it come together. Now we get the gnocchi back into the pan. Now you want to add that grated cheese and gently fold everything together so that it all becomes one solid dish. Only thing that can make it better now, guys, teaspoon of kosher salt and as much freshly ground black pepper as you like. All right, so don't leave it in the pan any longer than you need to, just until that cheese has melted and everything is coated together. Then get it off the heat and serve it right away. So guys, I really thank you for joining in to the final episode of my 6 weeks of spring recipes. This gnocchi takes a lot of work, but it is worth every second. I hope you give it a try. And if you enjoyed this video, hit that like button, guys, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel. What's the next series going to be, I wonder? I'll let you know soon enough. What's the next series going to be, Cassie?
I think that you should probably, maybe do like a sort of salad that includes tons of vegetables only from our garden, not from the store.
I love it! That's why this is Junior Culinarian. Good job, pal. So there you go, guys. Really something else. I love this recipe. I can't wait to hear how you enjoyed it when you make it yourself. Be sure to join me right here live from the Impulsive Culinarian kitchen every Wednesday night at 8:30 p.m. Eastern Time, where I open up a brand new bottle of something delicious, and I'd love to have that with you guys. Catch you in the next video.